If our children are misbehaving and not achieving the kind of education we desire them to achieve, it's because we don't have the power to see that they get it. Isn't that right? That's what it's about. We claim we know what they need. If we claim we know what they need and they're not getting what they need, then we must not have the power to give them what they need. Huh? If we're suffering from hunger and homelessness and all of the other stuff, and we have not changed that, it's because we have not developed what? The power to bring about the change. Because that's what power is about. The ability to bring about change in one's interest. The ability to solve problems. And if you cannot solve problems, that means then power is not being generated sufficient to solve those problems. And therefore, our problem here is a problem of power. And therefore, we must not be ashamed to recognize that we must pursue power as African people. That must be an obvious, conscious pursuit among us. And I know the white folk have made us think the idea of pursuing power is sinful. There's something wrong about it. We think power should only be pursued by white folk. That's white boys' game, right? Just like they've made us think that poverty is a natural condition of black folk.
That's right.
And wealth is a natural condition of white folk. That's a lie and a mythology. There's no reason for black people being poor in the world. Being poverty-stricken is not the destiny of African people. We do not have to accept that. Why are we poverty-stricken? Because we've been robbed. We were given and blessed by the Creator with natural wealth work with.
That's right.
That's right. If the intention of the Creator was that African people be poor, why did He put the wealth of the world in their lands? Given that wealth and placed in the land, placed under your feet, placed in the soil, and then you dare to think that your destiny is to be poor. You dare to think the condition of starvation is a natural condition of African people. No way. If God intended it to be that way, then why wasn't the wealth planted somewhere else and put somewhere else? And that means that if we were blessed with this wealth and we are not using this wealth, that means again we permitted somebody to falsify our minds. Because as I told you before, ultimately the wealth of the people is not in their land. The wealth of the people is ultimately in their head. The wealth is here, not in the land. Not in the land. The Japanese have no wealth in their land. And yet they are a powerful economic nation. Why did I tell you that? You know what? If you got a good mind, you can rob people's land. You can take people's wealth. So that mere having the wealth is not going to do anything for you. You got to have the capacity to what? Defend it. To use it. You see? But if it's given to you and your mind is not appropriately developed and your consciousness is not appropriately developed, other people who may not have anything but a mind, but a consciousness, will enrich themselves off of it. And this is what is happening to black folks. We are not poor because God has not been good to us. God has been abundant to us. We are poor because we've let another people deceive us. We are poor because we've fallen for mythologies. We are poor because we've learned the wrong kind of knowledge. We are poor because we've let our brains be impaired and atrophy in our heads. We are poor because we don't dare to love ourselves. We are poor because we don't dare to pursue power and dare to be independent and self-controlling and self-determined. We are poor because we don't have self-confidence and self-love, not because we don't have wealth. We look at the African nations today. What's the situation there? What's that situation there? We talk about those. It's amazing when you study the starvation in the Sahel Desert, when those people were starving. Do you realize they were shipping out great deals of food at that time?
Talk about that.
Do you realize that they were shipping food to the world? In fact, their highest levels of shipping beef and other foods were taking place at the very time they were starving? Do you realize that many of these nations where the people are going hungry are actually shipping all kinds of food to the world? Do you think the the African people in the Sahel did not know how to prepare for droughts when they've had centuries and centuries of drought occurring again and again, that they had to learn over time how to deal with that? Do you think the drought that occurred in the 70s was the first time they had droughts over there?
Talk about this.
When you read that Old Testament and you read about Joseph interpreting the dreams of the king, you recognize that they were dealing with the issue of drought then, didn't you? The king said, I saw 7 fat lambs and 7 slim ones. Whatever, right? He called his wise men in and interpreters in. I said, what does this mean? They couldn't figure it out. No Joseph walked in. Oh, this means you're going to have 7 lean years and 7 what? Fat years. You're going to have a drought that's going to go on for 7 years, and you're going to have 7 years of plenty. And what does that mean then? That you got to what? Store up your food during the 7 years of plenty so that you can survive the 7 years of hunger. And they had more food than they knew what to do with. They even fed other people from their stores. But this is what the Sahelian Africans were doing. Their standard practice was to have granaries where they had 4 years worth of food stored up, so that when those droughts came, they could do what? Feed themselves and take care of themselves, because they'd been through it before. But in came European agribusiness. In came so-called cash crops. In came people with a different concept of property and so forth, and reorganized the agricultural system of that country, such that then, while they were shipping out peanuts and shipping out beef and other things, they didn't have room and space to store up to feed themselves. And you find that in nation after nation today. People who, by one means or another, have had their consciousness twisted in a way that they can't even take care of their very bodily needs as folk. Yeah. Why are the African countries poverty-stricken and debt-stricken today? Is it because they don't have the wealth? No, it's because they have the wealth. You rob people who got money. You rob people who have wealth. You can't rob poor people. That's right. Poor people who have nothing, you don't get nothing. You rob people who got something, right? They may be poor as a result of being robbed, but I tell you what, and African people are poor as a result of being robbed, not poor as a result of not having something to begin with. What kind of situation do we have over there then? African monocultures. Selling cocoa beans. You can't even eat the damn thing. But yet that's the only source of your wealth. Yeah, you depend on that. And you plant every possible acre in that, so you know how to have room for a crop for your own family. Or you permit other people to come in and on all the land and all the plantations, and they plant every inch of it so that they can ship the food out, and they won't even allow the native people subsistence farming. So that while they feed overfed people in the West and in Europe, they themselves must go hungry. And they sell then their products in a buyer's market. That is where the buyer determines what they're going to pay for it, not where the seller is going to do it. And so it's the Europeans and Hershey and Nestle and those people who determine what they're going to pay for an African cocoa bean. The African doesn't have any control over that. And they pay less and less every year. They're paying less for them now than they paid 30 years ago. And you're wondering why the African nations are in debt. And these same nations then that lower the price for which they pay for African commodities and maintain these African countries on the basis of 1 or 2 products are the same countries that maintain their prices high and sell to the Africans at high prices and export their high-priced commodities and manufactures to Africa. And so debt is actually what? Created there. I buy too low from you, and I sell what? High to you. That's naturally going to impoverish you. And then we're going to talk about how you're incapable of running your countries. And then we wonder why the countries are broken down.